Sarah Matthews sits in her wheelchair at the altar, her white dress pristine against the worn church pew. The sanctuary holds 40 guests who came to witness her wedding, but the groom's chair remains empty. David fled 20 minutes ago, his best man Ivering whispered excuses about not being ready for this kind of responsibility. The guests murmur, some checking their phones, others shaking their heads with barely concealed pity. Sarah's hands grip her bouquet so tightly the stems might break. Thunder rumbles outside as motorcycle engines roar into the church parking lot. A massive figure in leather appears in the doorway, his Hell's Angels jacket catching the dim sanctuary light. 6 months earlier, Sarah had been different. She moved through hospital corridors with purpose, her nursing shoes squeaking against polished floors. Her engagement ring caught the fluorescent lights as she adjusted 4 drips. The silver medical bracelet hadn't existed then. Now it encircled her wrist, the engraving, T12 complete, marking where her spine had snapped during the accident. David had been driving that rainy November evening. They were returning from dinner with his parents, discussing wedding venues. Sarah remembered laughing when the truck ran the red light. The impact threw their car into a concrete barrier. When Sarah woke up 3 days later, her world had fundamentally changed. The settlement money bought her wheelchair, a lightweight titanium model customized with purple spoke guards. Sarah fought to return to work, but the hospital deemed her a liability. She knew the real reason: discomfort with her disability, the subtle prejudice that equated physical limitations with incompetence. David's proposal to move forward with their wedding surprised her. She'd expected him to end things. Instead, he suggested a small ceremony, something practical given their changed circumstances. His phrasing should have warned her. But Sarah had been desperate to prove her accident hadn't made her less worthy of love. The wedding preparations were modest. Jenny, her best friend from nursing school, helped coordinate details while David seemed increasingly distant. Her borrowed dress was altered to accommodate her seated position. At the altar, she'd felt hopeful despite everything. David's absence seemed like typical nervousness until minutes stretched into certainty. David Henley stood in the church bathroom, staring at his reflection. His bow tie hung loose and sweat beaded on his forehead. The gold wedding band in his palm felt impossibly heavy. His best man, Trevor, knocked. "Dave, you okay?" "It's almost time." David opened the door, his face pale. "I can't do this, Trev. She's going to need help with everything for the rest of her life." David whispered. "Getting dressed, getting in and out of bed." "David, you've had 6 months to think about this. Every day feels like I'm signing up to be a caregiver instead of a husband. I'm 28 years old. I'm supposed to be starting my career traveling. Instead, I'm researching wheelchair-accessible rentals." David set the ring on the sink's edge. "I can't promise to love her when I'm only here out of pity. Dave, there are 40 people out there. I know I'm a coward, but wouldn't it be worse to marry her and resent her forever?" David was already moving toward the back exit. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she deserves someone who can love her completely." Marcus Rodriguez had been riding for 3 hours through Montana when storm clouds gathered. Rain intensified until he could barely see. The small church appeared through the downpour. He pulled his Harley into the parking lot. The leather patch on his jacket read, "Prospect." His Hell's Angels membership earned through brutal initiation 3 years ago. The patch represented survival, but also the violence that had become his identity since leaving the army. Afghanistan felt like another lifetime, though the nightmares still came. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, combat medic. He'd kept his unit alive under fire until the IED destroyed his convoy, leaving him as the sole survivor. 23 soldiers dead, 1 medic alive. The Hells Angels found him in a bar, drunk and looking for a fight. Instead, they offered brotherhood built on shared damage. But they didn't see the Purple Heart hidden in his apartment, or the silver star he'd earned dragging wounded soldiers to safety. The church door opened easily. Marcus slipped into the back row, water dripping from his jacket. He intended to wait out the storm, but something caught his attention. A woman in a white dress sat alone at the altar in a wheelchair. No groom. Guests shifting uncomfortably, whispering. The bride's posture spoke of dignity under pressure. Marcus had seen that look before, soldiers maintaining composure while everything collapsed. A man in a tuxedo approached awkwardly, leaning down to whisper. Her face went pale, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded. The guests' whispers grew louder. Knew this would happen. Such a shame. The casual cruelty triggered something protective in him. This woman was under attack. Sarah's fingers traced the silver locket at her throat. Inside were tiny photographs of her parents. Grandma Rose had given it to her, explaining it had belonged to her own mother. They carried the strength of the women who came before you. Pastor Williams approached carefully. He married her parents in this sanctuary, officiated at their funeral when she was 8. Sarah, what would you like me to tell everyone? She looked at the 40 guests. About half showed genuine sympathy. The other half leaned forward with barely concealed excitement. Mrs. Henderson had her phone out, texting updates. Tell them, Sarah said clearly, that sometimes life gives us exactly what we need, even when it's not what we expected. Jenny rushed forward, kneeling beside Sarah's wheelchair. I'm going to kill him, Jenny whispered. No, Sarah replied. He did me a favor. You're in shock. Let's get you out of here. But Sarah wasn't ready to leave. 6 months of doubt had led to this clarity. She didn't want a man who stayed out of obligation. David's abandonment hurt, but his honesty was a gift. Her gaze fell on the stranger in the back row. He sat perfectly still, a massive figure who seemed oddly at ease. He wasn't staring with pity. He was simply present. Would you like me to dismiss everyone? Pastor Williams asked. No. I'm going to sit here and appreciate that I just learned something important. Then I'm going to leave with my dignity intact. Marcus stood slowly. At 6 feet 3 inches and 240 pounds, he commanded space. His leather jacket creaked as he stepped into the aisle. He walked toward the altar, focused entirely on the woman maintaining her dignity. Sarah looked up as his shadow fell across her wheelchair. His eyes held something unexpected, respect. Ma'am, he said quietly. Looks like you could use an escort out of here. Sarah studied his face, noting the scars and military bearing. I don't even know your name. Marcus Rodriguez. And you don't need to know anything else except that I don't leave people behind when they're under fire. The military terminology struck her as appropriate. The guests' whispers felt like enemy action. What are you suggesting? Walk you out with your head high. Let everyone see that what happened today doesn't define you. Mrs. Henderson had her phone out again, probably recording. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Marcus considered seriously. Because someone should. And because I recognize strength when I see it. Jenny, would you get my purse from the vestry? Jenny hesitated, uncomfortable leaving Sarah alone with this stranger. But Sarah's tone carried authority. As Jenny left, Sarah adjusted her chair to face the congregation. Mr. Rodriguez, I would appreciate your assistance leaving this church. Marcus nodded. He positioned himself behind her wheelchair. Ready when you are, ma'am. The guests parted as they moved down the aisle. Marcus ignored the whispers. The church's front steps presented a challenge. 3 concrete steps separated the sanctuary from the parking lot. There's a ramp on the north side, Marcus said. I know. But honestly, I'm tired of taking the long way around things. Marcus understood immediately. The steps represented every obstacle society placed in her path. How do you want to handle it? Can you help me down backward? Marcus positioned himself to guide the descent. The rain had intensified, turning the parking lot into a maze of puddles. Marcus's motorcycle gleamed despite the downpour. Where to? Marcus asked. Sarah looked around. Jenny's car waited. Her own modified Honda sat nearby. But something about this moment demanded a different choice. I've never ridden a motorcycle, Sarah said, rain soaking through her wedding dress. Marcus smiled. Then today seems like a good day to start. Marcus helped Sarah transfer to his Harley. Hold on tight, he said. The engine's rumble echoed off the church walls, drowning out gasps from guests. Sarah wrapped her arms around his waist. As they pulled out, she caught Jenny's horrified face. The thought made her laugh out loud. They rode through town at the speed limit. Sarah had lived here her entire life, but seeing it from a motorcycle transformed familiar sights into something foreign and exciting. For the first time since her accident, she didn't care what other people thought. Marcus turned onto Highway 87, heading toward the mountains. They pulled into Murphy's diner. Marcus helped Sarah transfer back to her wheelchair, which he'd secured to the bike's rear rack. Inside, conversation stopped. But the waitress simply smiled. "Booth or table?" "Booth," Sarah said. As they settled in, Sarah studied Marcus's face. "Thank you." "For what?" "For treating me like I could make my own choices." Sarah unlocked her apartment door. The space reflected years of adaptation: grab bars, lowered countertops, a roll-in shower. Everything designed for independence. She transferred to the couch. The wedding dress felt like costume jewelry, beautiful but worthless. She struggled with the tiny buttons down the back. "Need help?" Marcus asked. "The buttons," she said, turning. Marcus's fingers worked them with surprising gentleness. "You were a nurse," he observed, noting the framed license. "Was being the operative phrase. Hospitals consider wheelchair-using nurses a liability. Their loss. Good medics are hard to find." "Were you really a medic?" "Army. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Kept a lot of soldiers breathing who shouldn't have made it home." "What happened?" "IED took out my convo. I was the only one who walked away." "Survivor's guilt. Is that why you joined the motorcycle club?" "Partly. They understood that some things change you permanently." Sarah changed into jeans and a sweater. Marcus had moved to the window. "Coffee?" she offered. As Sarah prepared coffee, Marcus studied photographs on her refrigerator. "Your grandmother?" "Grandma Rose. She raised me after my parents died. Taught me that strength comes from how you handle what life throws at you." David's letter arrived 3 days later. The envelope sat unopened for hours. When the doorbell rang, Sarah saw David with a bouquet of roses. His appearance was carefully calculated. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I made a tour." "What do you want?" "To explain. To make things right." I panicked. "Come in," she said. David entered cautiously. His gaze lingered on the photograph of Sarah and Marcus laughing together. "Who's the guy?" "A friend. Someone who showed up when it mattered." "Sarah, people are talking. They're saying you're making decisions you'll regret." The paternalistic tone triggered anger. "At least now they have something interesting to discuss. I want to try again. We can postpone the wedding, work through my concerns." "Your concerns?" "About the future, about whether I'm equipped to handle the challenges." "What changed your mind?" "I realized how much I love you. 3 years doesn't disappear because of one moment of weakness." "David, do you remember what you said when I asked about hiking after my accident?" "I said we'd find other activities." "You said hiking was off the table permanently?" "Marcus took me riding through the mountains yesterday. We stopped at 3 scenic overlooks I'd never seen before." The comparison hung between them. The confrontation ended poorly. Sarah removed her engagement ring and placed it in his palm. "You can't be serious," David said. "You're choosing some criminal over 3 years?" "I'm choosing someone who sees possibilities instead of limitations." 2 hours later, Marcus knocked. "Figured you might not feel like cooking," he said, carrying takeout. They ate in comfortable silence. "He wants me back," Sarah said finally. "What do you want?" "I want to feel alive again. I want someone who sees adventure instead of obstacles." "Sounds reasonable." "Marcus, what are we doing here?" "You're a Hells Angels member. I'm a disabled former nurse. Maybe we're both people who've learned that life doesn't follow the scripts everyone else writes. The club won't welcome a girlfriend in a wheelchair. The club respects strength. They'll see yours." Sarah wheeled closer. Are you offering me your world? I'm offering to share it. She kissed him, tasting freedom and possibility. The leather jacket arrived 6 months later. Custom made with magnetic closures, shortened sleeves for wheelchair maneuvering. The Hells Angels patches marked her as Marcus's old lady. Their new life in Colorado exceeded expectations. Marcus found work as a trauma counselor at the VA. Sarah's nonprofit, Veterans Adaptive Services, helped disabled veterans and their families transition to civilian life. Robert Patterson called, Sarah said one evening. He got promoted. Wants to speak at our fundraising dinner. Sarah showed Marcus architectural plans for a residential facility for transitioning veterans. Tank approached me. The Hells Angels want to sponsor construction. They'll donate land and provide volunteer labor. How many families could this serve? 24 apartments. We could help 200 veteran families annually. When do we start? Next month. The wedding announcement arrived 2 years later. David's engagement photos showed him with Catherine Westbrook, daughter of a banking family. An elaborate Bahamas wedding was planned. Interesting choice, Marcus commented. Exactly what he always wanted. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he hadn't left? Marcus asked. I'd be miserable, probably divorced, definitely bitter. David would have spent our marriage resenting me. David's announcement went into recycling. Sarah had more important concerns. Tonight she would help a frightened young man understand that spinal cord injury represented a new chapter, not an ending. Sarah's gratitude journal sat open on her nightstand. Tonight's entry would commemorate the 2nd anniversary of her abandoned wedding, now a celebration. They'd returned to Montana, speaking at the Veterans Hospital. Pastor Williams approached after. Sometimes the worst moments create space for the best possibilities. Mrs. Henderson attended too. The woman who'd recorded Sarah's humiliation now volunteered with their organization. Do you ever think about the other timeline? Sarah asked. Where I married him and spent 40 years trying to be smaller than I am? Sometimes. Makes me realize how lucky we got finding each other when we both needed saving. Tomorrow they would break ground on the Veterans Transition Facility. I have something for you, Marcus said, producing a small package. Inside was a silver charm bracelet with a tiny motorcycle. For our adventures, Marcus explained. Past and future. Sarah fastened it beside her medical alert bracelet. The contrast struck her as perfect, one marking limitation, the other celebrating possibility. 2 years ago she'd been abandoned at an altar. Tonight she fell asleep beside the man who'd shown her that sometimes the best chapters begin when the worst ones close.